All right, guys, this is it. This is our this is our last week of this class. Um, you hopefully noticed that I have structured this week a little bit differently than most of them. There's no discussion board, there's no journal, there's no quiz. You've got to do your authentication survey for the end of the class. Um, we're reading Hamlet. It's going to be a fantastic piece for your final project um, because there are so many different characters doing so much stuff in that one that I guarantee whatever you're working with, you will find an example, positive or negative, that you can work with on that one. But otherwise, all of our energy is just on our final paper. And I'm going to go ahead and just talk about that one a little bit more for everyone as well. So the basic idea behind this final paper is that you are writing a long form comparison, not a comparison contrast. Comparison just has to do with similarity, making an argument that for a particular um, role in a story, so that can be a relational role, um, father, mother, child, um, sibling, friend, whatever. Um, it can be an archetypical type of role, so leader or follower or traveler or teacher or sage or magician or whatever. It can be something inherent, man, woman, supernatural being. Um, pick pick a role or a combination of roles that you're going to be using throughout the entire essay, and then one of the virtues that you think is important for that particular character. And again, if you can make it something that's not incredibly obvious, then it tends to lead to a better paper overall. Um, Obviously, yes, warriors need to be courageous. That's not in question. But maybe the importance of contemplation for warriors could be a little bit more interesting, or the importance of courage for caregivers. Manipulators obviously need to be very contemplative, but is it also important for them to be compassionate? I don't know. Um, and you're going to go through and you're going to pull examples from a minimum of three different units we've done this semester. You're going to go through and just briefly establish why, in the particular moment that you're looking at in the story, um, the character that you're talking about does fill that role, and they are or are not displaying that virtue, and then what the outcomes of that action are. And there are a couple of different ways that can go. So if they're not displaying the virtue and it goes badly, that's fantastic evidence for your point. Um, if they are displaying the virtue and it goes very well for them, that is again fantastic evidence for your point. If it is not doing that, if they're not displaying that virtue very well, but it still goes well for them, that can still be showing that it is important, and it could have gone better otherwise. Um, and if they are showing it, but it's going badly, then that might show that that's not the only virtue that matters, but it is still one that does matter, and that's also going to be worthy of discussion. So there can be some nuance to this when it doesn't have to just be good, 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 good. You can discuss um, negatives in there as well, and times that it seems like it might be less important. That's okay. Again, this is academic writing. We're trying to get to the truth. You're hopefully choosing something that is true, and you will be able to prove that it is true, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be true 100% of the time. There are going to be cultures that just don't value certain virtues or certain roles, and that's okay too. Um, you can bring in anything else that you need in order to make your point. In addition to that American pragmatic work, you can do some more of that good old fashioned new historicism work and show like how their world is different than ours and how it might go differently in our world. If you want to do that, that's a way that you can take it as well. But at its core, I'm just looking for 3 to 4 pages, double space, standard MLA format. Um, of good argumentation on that one. The more specific you can make your examples and the more detail you can explain them in, the better it's going to end up being in the long run. Um, Simply because that's going to give me a lot more that I can work with, particularly if you're citing specific page numbers, then I can go through and look at directly where it is that you're looking at. Um, you can do some of those overarching moments like, oh yeah, just constantly in the story, then Gilgamesh is doing this. I mean, that's okay. Um, for like one example, but if you can pull out like two or three different times that he's doing that, that's going to give you two or three different body paragraphs that you can build out using just that one character. Um, if you've got a particular character or story that you felt like you really related to, that might be a good starting point to figure this one out. Um, there aren't wrong answers on this one. As long as you're proving your point well, then whether or not I agree with it is pretty much irrelevant. I'm just looking at how the argument itself is made and the examples that you're pulling from. Um, with that being said, we do also have to talk a little bit about Hamlet this week. Like I said, there's a little bit of everything in Hamlet. We get to see our supernatural creatures. We get to see friends. We get to see enemies. We get to see straight up villains. Um, we get to see lovers. Hamlet himself takes on so many different roles through the entire thing. Sometimes he's acting as a counselor. Sometimes he's acting as a manipulator. One of the great arguments that I absolutely love in literary circles um, is Hamlet acting the way that he is because he starts legitimately going insane, or is it largely an act? Because there's a lot of evidence on both sides. Um, but ultimately, this comes down to the story of a guy who has been through some shit. The world around him is crumbling. His world is crumbling around him, and he's having a hard time with it. And he's having trouble keeping up, and he's trying to figure out what to do. Sound familiar? Yeah. Um, and we are very particularly ending with Hamlet. One, because I just love Hamlet. Um, it's my second favorite of Shakespeare's plays. The first one is Midsummer Night's Dream, which, if you still need a literature credit, then feel free to take that. Take Intro to Literature with me, because we always read Midsummer Night's Dream. If it's in the book still. We actually just got an updated book, so I should check that. But um, this is my second favorite one. It's perennial. Um, and we're at the beginning of the modern world. Um, Arguably, the actual modern age starts somewhere between 1550 and 1650, depending on what we're considering the most significant dates on that one. But Shakespeare is right around 1600. Um, so it's a good marker to work with. Um, if you end up taking modern masterpieces, you may also get to read some Shakespeare in there, because we kind of double up, because there is some fluidity in when exactly the modern world began. But anyway, for this week, enjoy the reading. If you've got access to it on a streaming service, I would also recommend watching some version of Hamlet. It's not a requirement; it's just a lot of fun. Um, and keep working on those papers. If you haven't shot me an email about what you're thinking of for your final, then do so quickly, just because as we get to the end of our class, then I'm also entering finals week for all of my half-term classes, um, and either midterms or finals for all of my classes. So I may be a little bit slower to respond on email than usual. So sooner rather than later is best for that. And I will see you guys at the other end of this week. Good luck with your papers.